Did you live through the 90s? And do you remember the 16-bit wars of the Super Nintendo and the Sega Mega Drive? Well, I did, and I do remember it fondly. Your household either had one of these two consoles, and it was a hot topic and talking debates throughout my school years. And today, in 2022, we're blessed to have both of these consoles in mini format, outputting to HDMI. But which one is better? We're going to compare the Super Nintendo Mini with the Sega Mega Drive Mini 2, which has just been released. We're going to look at the controllers, the consoles, the games, the sound, and much more. This is a big one, guys. Which console will be superior? So yes, the battle of the 16-bit wars rages on into 2022, and that is exactly why I wanted to put this video together. Let's take a look at the comparisons in terms of the controllers, the units themselves, the games, and more. Let's go. Oh, and by the way, if this video makes you smile just a fraction, I would appreciate it if you could subscribe. Please share it out there into the ether for me, and I will love you forever. Let's go. So here they are side by side, and there's nothing overly remarkable other than the size of the Super Nintendo Mini, which looks like a giant in comparison with the Sega Mega Drive Mini Model 2. Now, in terms of functionality, they are quite different actually. Notably, the power button here, which does light up when the SNES Mini is turned on, whereas unfortunately, and everybody's mentioned it, there's no light on the Mega Drive Mini 2. I understand that it was a lot cheaper to do it without, but it's still a massive feature missing from the Mega Drive Mini 2 in comparison with the SNES Mini. Now, one thing this does have that this doesn't is a replica the flap for the cartridge, whereas on the Super Nintendo it is completely dormant. It would have been so much better if they'd have had this thing as a working flap as such, and unfortunately the eject button doesn't work as well, which is another missed opportunity in my opinion. So that's about it really in terms of the side by side and noticeable differences. For me, I think it's kind of 50-50. The light is a good thing here, whereas it's missing there. The cartridge flap doesn't work, whereas it does there. So for me, it's kind of like a 1 point each in terms of the actual designs and basic functionality. Controllers next then, and of course with the Super Nintendo Mini you do get two controllers, which is a huge plus because back in the 16-bit days couch co-op was a huge thing. Obviously with the Mega Drive Mini 2, unlike the Mega Drive Mini, you only get one, but the advantage being it is a 6-button controller compared to the Mega Drive Mini's just a 3-button. I mean, again, there's nothing overly remarkable in terms of what these things do. They're controllers after all, and both of them emulate the original hardware very, very well. Again, the downside is only one controller, whereas this, you get two. So for me, the Super Nintendo does win it in terms of controllers because you do get the two, making that couch co-op, enjoyment with your family and your children, much, much better. Now, don't worry, I'll show you this properly. But to the naked eye, and without stretching these out, the Mega Drive Mini 2 controller, the wire, the flex, the cable is so much longer than the Super Nintendo controller. But what does that actually mean in terms of numbers? The numbers will be on screen now, but I've laid these out as best I can, and you can actually see that there's a hammer anchoring the Super Nintendo flex, but see how much longer the Mega Drive Mini 2 controller flex is. There's a noticeable difference, and if you're utilising this on your couch with your family, it's going to be huge. So for me, this wins. Straight to the side-by-side comparison, it's easy to see that the Super Nintendo Mini interface really does pop. And I said this in a previous video about the Mega Drive Mini 2 interface, that it looks very grey, it doesn't pop, and I feel the background's a little bit underwhelming. You can see for yourself that it just feels and looks absolutely gorgeous. In terms of the backgrounds, again, you can kind of see that the SNES Mini just pops out a little bit, and I think it's to do with the black background, if you can see, whereas the Sega Mega Drive Mini has a background on a background on a background, so it just looks a little bit discombobulated. One final thing about the interface is, again, the SNES Mini has that gorgeous scrolling Super Famicom background. If we zoom in slightly, you can see it there, and I think that adds a really, really nice flair. Let me know what you think, and let's take a look at games next. Now, the big argument here is going to be quality over quantity, because the SNES only has 21 titles packed in, albeit they are absolutely incredible. And to buy the physical original copies, some of them, such as Earthbound, can cost you thousands. So overall, this is quite a nice library. Now, the Sega Mega Drive Mini 2 has considerably more. I've done a review on this thing, and if you want to go and check out demos of every single game, I will link it in the cards for your gorgeous entertainment. But obviously we have more quantity here. The question is, what is the quality versus quantity ratio? To answer that, we need to look at the games in a bit more depth. The SNES Mini has some of the most common titles, such as F-Zero and the likes of Super Mario World, in its library. And yes, there are rare titles on both. I mean, a copy of Streets of Rage 3, for example, physical, complete in box, is probably going to cost you well over £150 these days. So I've said it once before and I'll say it again, the SNES Minis are fantastic for people who don't want to collect physical media, but for those that do, you might want to reconsider getting any of the minis, because for me personally, I like them both. I like physical media, I don't mind paying too much money, but I also like owning the minis as well because you can play in gorgeous HDMI. So the SNES Mini does have some really quality titles, and I've said it once before and I'll say it again. On the Super Nintendo Mini, I'm way more familiar with the games that are on here, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do feel like they've got a really nice balance between the amount that's on there and the quality of games. We know, obviously, that the Sega Mega Drive Mini 2 has a lot more games on there, but a lot of them I don't really like as much as I do on the SNES Mini, so for that reason, I think the SNES Mini just pips it to the post ever so slightly in terms of its video game library. So let's compare Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting with the new Challengers, the closest comparison I could get between the two minis. The SNES intro sounds better, but I think the Mega Drive looks better. The character models on the Super Nintendo look so much more polished. I mean, obviously the SNES was the superior console technologically, but it's really interesting to see these side by side. What do you guys think?
Round one, fight! Tiger! 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 Yoga! Yoga! Flame! Yoga! You win!
Round one, fight!
So it's pretty clear that the Super Nintendo Mini does have that crispier sound. Looking at them side by side, there's clear frame rate drops, and I'm not Digital Foundry by any stretch of the imagination, so what that translates to in numbers, I don't know. But I can speak from the heart here. Both play pretty poorly, but having sat and played these for this episode, the Mega Drive one does feel way slower and way more janky. So, what do you think, guys? For me, the Super Nintendo Mini pips it in terms of sound, obviously in terms of visuals and more polished character models. I had to pinch myself a little bit because I laughed that it was indeed 2022 and I'm still talking about the Super Nintendo and the Sega Mega Drive and what they have to offer by today's standards. For me, the Super Nintendo does pip it ever so slightly with the fact that you've got two controllers, you've got a working actual power button, which for me just adds so much weird nostalgia. I cannot even begin to explain the value that power light adds to me. It's weird, I know. And as much as I'm so familiar with the games on the SNES Mini, perhaps aside from Mario RPG, it was an NTSC exclusive, I just feel that it offers a lot more by today's standards. However, I do love the Sega Mega Drive 2 Mini, and I'm so glad Sega is still pumping out hardware in this, into this year. And I do think we will see a Dreamcast Mini, because shortly after they put out the Mega Drive 2 Mini, there was this poll going on, and they were asking what would you like to see next. And of course, everybody was talking about the Dreamcast and the Saturn, but there seems to be more of a lean towards the Dreamcast as the next Mini. Now that's not confirmed, I am speculating, but I want my viewers to tell me what Mini would you like to see Sega bring out next and why? Now it's going to be an interesting one because there's so many good games, and being able to then play that again in gorgeous HDMI, it's very exciting. As far as the next Nintendo Mini goes, well, of course, we're looking at the N64 Mini, but we've been looking at the N64 Mini and speculating about that ever since the SNES Mini was launched. We're yet to see a sniff, a wave, or even just a puff of smoke of it, so who knows what's going on in the deep, dark depths of Nintendo. We can only dive into 2023 and find out together. So there we go, there'll be more Mini content coming, we've got more Amiga content coming. I've even got this little giveaway running over on the Gebs24 Facebook. I will link it if you want to go and join. It's dead easy, you just need to share some content. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to leave it there, and I will see you in the next episode. Cheers. I need a few seconds of your time to tell you about channel memberships. If you guys want to become a channel member, click join from the main page or the second link in the description. There are 3 tiers, all with different perks for you if you want to become a team member. Thanks for your time. Let's continue with the video.